I was born in a small industrial town, and as far back as I can remember, things were always tight at home. My parents arguing is one of the strongest memories I have, not because they didn't love each other, but because life was just weighing down on them so much. Back then, a lot of state-owned factories were restructuring, and workers were being laid off left and right. My dad was one of the few who kept his job, but honestly, it didn't make much difference. He was only bringing home 300 yuan a month, barely enough to get us by. The truth is, it was my mom who was holding us together. She'd worked before. Back when she was young, she'd been a waitress, an accountant, even done sales. She was always a capable woman, but after marrying and having me, she had to stay home. Our financial situation got worse, and she wanted to work again, but with me being so little, it wasn't possible. I was barely a year old, and the bills were already crushing her. My dad, on the other hand, just seemed to be a bystander. He didn't really try to figure out how to make things better. Most of the time, he'd just end up taking his frustrations out on my mom. I remember scenes of their arguments. My mom would bring up ideas, telling him he could maybe drive a taxi, or set up a little food stand to bring in some extra money, but he'd always shut it down. My grandpa was a factory worker, and my dad grew up around factory workers, so he didn't know how to do anything else. When he couldn't handle the pressure, he'd lash out, as if everything wrong was somehow our fault. I could never understand it. I mean, he was the only one with a steady paycheck, yet he never tried to fix anything, only added to her burden. I guess he just didn't know how to deal with the kind of problems life was throwing at us. Back then, a lot of men were like that. They didn't talk things through, just ended up venting at the ones closest to them. My mom took a lot of hits because of it. After every fight, she'd quietly clean up and then come over to put me to bed, as if nothing had happened. She'd never let me see her cry or know about the conflict, but deep down, I understood it all. One night, he blew up again and stormed out, leaving my mom and me alone in the cold house. I was young, but I could feel the air in the room was heavy. It was almost suffocating. My mom still held it together, quietly taking on everything alone. She found ways to borrow money, and as soon as I was old enough to walk, she'd leave me with my grandparents and go out to do odd jobs just to keep us going. That became our daily life, her carrying this weight on her shoulders, day after day. She never gave up, though. She'd always put on a smile for me and say, "Things will get better." When I grew up, I became a pedicurist, a job a lot of people don't understand, but in it, I found my own value. Maybe it was those early years that taught me to see life for what it is, and to know that dignity is something you earn with your own two hands. I stopped waiting for anyone else to lift me up, and started finding my own path forward.